How is it going, everyone? We've got some major Resident Evil Requiem updates to go over in this video. There was an in-depth interview over on the PlayStation blog giving us some new insights into the game and some of the various aspects, including, if you have a PS5 Pro console, some very impressive enhancements will be coming if you do have a Pro. So we'll talk about that and some of the other insights. Before I get into this video, if you are looking to play this game on PC and Steam, I do want to give a shout to our good friends over at Green Man Gaming, as they have got the game significantly discounted 18% off for $57.39. You'll get a Steam key for the game, and on top of that, you won't pay tax. They're a great spot to buy your PC games. Link in the description box below. And if you do buy it, we do get an affiliate kickback, which is much appreciated. But now, on to the video. Again, the PlayStation blog had a Resident Evil Requiem interview talking about the various aspects of the game. I will start off with the PlayStation 5 Pro enhancements, which was noted from Koshi Nakanishi in this interview. On PlayStation 5 Pro, ray tracing can be turned on or off. With it enabled, players can enjoy the game in 4K at 60 frames per second with full ray tracing. If you disable it, it supports up to 120 frames per second, averaging at 90 frames per second on high refresh rate displays. We spent a lot of time on optimization. Yeah, it definitely tells if you're getting 4K 60 with ray tracing turned on. I think that's the holy grail, even for the Pro console. If you can do 4K 60, you know, with PSSR, and then also enable ray tracing, that is incredibly impressive, and not a lot of games can pull that off. There are certainly some, but not all of them coming out are pulling that off. And on top of that, Resident Evil Requiem, I think, is a gorgeous game. Some of the scenery that we've seen and set pieces, particularly from the NVIDIA little footage that they put out a while ago, I thought looked incredibly impressive. And also the new gameplay that they put out somewhat recently. I think the game just looks really solid from a visual standpoint, and I don't think Resident Evil has been known for being a franchise that absolutely pushed the envelope in terms of visuals, but RE4 Remake looked great, RE2 Remake still looks great, and I know those are only a couple of years old, but still, Requiem looks to be leveling up beyond that as well. Alright, moving on to the interview itself, there were specific insights that I did find interesting. As far as the development of the game, development actually began on a small scale 6 years ago, but it really took shape in its current form about 3 years ago. Ethan's storyline concluded with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard and the 8th mainline entry, Resident Evil Village. While both Resident Evil 7 and Village were very well received, they veered away from the main storyline leading up to Resident Evil 6, so we decided it was time to steer the story back on track. Well, veering away from RE6, given the reception of RE6, and doing a couple of games that could have been like kind of a fresh starting point for some people, I think that was a good idea. Now, though, I feel like Resident Evil's goodwill has been completely rebuilt. It's really not often, a lot of the times, when you see a franchise do that. Like, there was this time where Resident Evil, look, it was beloved back in the day, then you had the release of Resident Evil 6, and, you know, games like Revelations and Revelations 2, while I like those games, it did bring Resident Evil down a little bit of a notch in terms of player perception of the franchise, but it has been completely restored, and I would argue then some. I would argue that Resident Evil is bigger than it's ever been, and it's kind of fascinating to see that for a franchise that has this much legacy that Resident Evil has. It has gone through that bit of a roller coaster in terms of overall perception of the series, and I don't think the perception of the series was ever really in the gutter, even though 6 had a mixed reception, but definitely it didn't always have the reception that it does now. The demo threw us right into the game, so the story felt a little abrupt. Will the final product be accessible for players who haven't played the earlier entries, which I think is a fascinating point to bring up. The game is designed to be welcoming to complete newcomers who don't know anything about the Raccoon City incident or haven't played any Resident Evil titles before. While series fans will instantly recognize Leon, Grace is a brand new character who's never faced a zombie and only knows about the Raccoon City incident through her mother's involvement. New players can dive into their first Resident Evil adventure right alongside Grace, which I think that is a really good strategy for this game, where Requiem, it doesn't even have the Resident Evil 9 label on it, it's just Resident Evil Requiem. I do think there's gonna be an audience, and I've actually talked to a couple of people. My one buddy that plays quite a few video games a year, but he's never played a Resident Evil title, I sold him on Requiem, and I think there's gonna be a lot of people just based on the general reception of Resident Evil these days, and it being one of the biggest titles of early 26, that if they never played a Resident Evil game, they're still gonna check this one out And I think having Grace as a character that has a little bit of attachment towards Resident Evil lore, but it's not absolutely consequential, and then also having Leon, who is this incredibly iconic character, and even if you're not super into Resident Evil, chances are you've seen Leon at some point, so I think having those two at the helm of the story, that makes a lot of sense, where it's gonna be something that longtime fans are gonna be really into, but for the newcomers, I think they are gonna be welcoming of it as well, so I think they handled that pretty well. Did you explore any new approaches to horror in this game? A big focus for us was reinventing the zombies. Zombies are so ubiquitous in games now that their weakness and behaviors have become predictable. For instance, they're typically weak to headshots, however, the familiarity kills the fear and tension. Zombies in this game retain some traces of human intelligence and instincts, some obsessively repeat bizarre human behaviors, while others pick up weapons dropped by other enemies to attack. We wanted to transform zombies into threats that consistently defy player expectations and keep them on the edge. Overall, this game may be scarier than Resident Evil Village, but it alternates between tension and relief, so it's not a continuous suffocating experience. Mind you that the Leon sections of this game are going to be the more action-heavy approach, and the Grace sections are going to be those more treacherous, methodical, engrossing experiences in the sense of really making you feel a little bit more on the powerless side, where Leon, they've always said that making Leon be powerless, I don't think that's what longtime fans wanted. Leon is a character that's held in a certain regard, that making him the methodical, stealthy character, it could work at times, but you can't have overall sections be tied to that. And I think that's a good way of handling the structural differences of the gameplay, but at the same time keeping it relevant to the characters involved. And hopefully that does create a compelling dichotomy where when you play a Leon section and then you alternate to Grace, that, you know, you got your action-heavy approach and then you do have the more methodical approach, and they just complement one another rather than being two completely distinct experiences. You still have that essence of Resident Evil there. Many players found Resident Evil 7 intensely frightening, leading you to dial things back in RE Village. Where would you place Requiem on the terror scale? Again, some players found it hard to finish Resident Evil 7, so we toned down the horror a bit in Resident Evil Village. In Requiem, Leon segments lead more into satisfying action, which allows us to really push the horror. In Grace's sections, Leon's parts are still spooky, of course, but I'd say they're more exhilarating than purely horrifying. Overall, this game may be scarier than Village, but it alternates between tension and relief, so it's not a continuous suffocating experience. As far as having a variety of areas, as you've seen in the trailers, the game eventually takes you to present-day Raccoon City. Resident Evil games often switch up locations as you go, and Requiem does the same. Also in the demo, Grace and Leon sections both took place in the same sanatorium, but their stories branch out to different spots later. Do one protagonist's actions impact the others? Yes. For example, if you switch from Grace to Leon in the same location, any enemies Grace took down stay dead for Leon, and the same goes for items on the ground. However, it's tough for Grace, who's always short on ammo, to wipe out all the enemies using Leon's to take down the enemies that Grace fled from is one of the game's highlight. As far as strategy goes, the more you play, the more you discover how actions in one part affect the other, so it creates a different kind of replay value compared to previous games in the series, and that'll be pretty interesting as well, because you have these two different characters that are gonna have this cohesive aspect to it. How you handle the Grace sections can impact the Leon sections and vice versa, so optimizing the way you play each character can also make the other character easier to go through. I find that this is gonna be a very interesting game to see how speedruns are handled. So we'll see about that. Grace could collect antique coins, whereas Leon found them unnecessary and would not pick any up. And those are exclusive to Grace, so Leon can't pick anything up. There are still traditional upgrades available for Leon, like weapon enhancements and modifications. The demo emphasized Leon's action-packed gameplay, but as the game progresses, even he will have to face uphill battles, and properly upgrading Leon will become crucial as well. As far as evasion, absolutely try crouching when an enemy sweeps at you from above. This tactic works for both Leon and Grace, although Grace tends to lean more on survival and items rather than direct combat. This time we came up with the chainsaws for everybody concept, which was a fresh take that unlocked a lot of creative possibilities. Again, the chainsaws are iconic Resident Evil weapon, and with so many variations across past games, we always challenge ourselves to innovate. This time we came up with that concept, which was a fresh take that unlocked a lot of creative possibilities. If a weaker nurse zombie swings a chainsaw, it'll slip from her grip and go flying. The team put a lot of care into those types of details. Speaking about the camera perspective, as you know, mainline Resident Evil titles were in third person from Resident Evil 4 through 6, then shifted to first person in 7 and Village. However, some players struggled playing in first person. We added third person support with the Village DLC, and some players were finally able to play comfortably. That inspired us to offer the choice from the start, and our experience working on the DLC made it a pretty smooth integration. We recognize that some players found first person mode too frightening, but still could enjoy the game in third person. That said, seeing Grace panic on screen caught some players off guard and started startle them unexpectedly, which was a nice surprise. Resident Evil thrives on evoking genuine terror, so we harness PS5 features to amplify the horror elements. For example, during a zombie attack, haptic feedback simulates the zombie's grip and bite on your arm through the controller. Adaptive triggers dynamically adjust trigger resistance depending on the weapon, while gun reloads trigger vibrations and audio from the controller's microphone. In puzzles requiring players to rotate a box filled with gems, we simulated the clattering of gems through vibrations and controller audio to deepen the game's realism and immersion. Speaking of immersion, 3D audio's immersive soundscape is crucial, and the game's ambient sounds are captured across 12 channels, including vertical positioning. Unlike simple mono or stereo IR waveforms, this approach offers far superior spatial reverb, creating an unprecedented sense of presence. And lastly, they concluded with the PlayStation 5 Pro notes, which I already went over, but again, on PS5 Pro, you can turn ray tracing on and off. With it enabled, players can enjoy the game at 4K 60. With it off, you can go up to 120 FPS, but averaging 90 on high refresh rate monitors. Resident Evil Requiem is one of my most anticipated games of the year, and given how consistent Resident Evil has been as a franchise, the only real criticism you can make is Resident Evil 3 a remake, if you thought that was a lesser tier title. But Biohazard, Resident Evil 2 remake, even the 3 remake I thought was good, the 4 remake was outstanding, and Village obviously was really good as well. So the level of consistency that Resident Evil has had for the last damn near decade, you guys. Biohazard came out in 2017. It has been a decade almost of Resident Evil being incredibly consistent, and next year will probably be Code Veronica remake, and I got a feeling that's gonna be pretty well received as well. So Resident Evil is on a hot streak right now, but that'll do it for me. Requiem is out in just a few weeks at this point, February the 27th. If you do want to pick up the game on PC and Steam, Green Man Gaming, go get it a little bit cheaper. That'll do it for me. Your thoughts down below, sound off there. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.